Our sponsors, Wells Fargo, Blake Anglin with Wells Fargo, and Lee Harris and Todd Leverage with Lockton. So they help us put this on. We really appreciate that. And then our steering committee, Blake Anglin with, it's all together. So the CFOs on our steering committee are Steve Kearney with Concord, Steve Arman with Health Tracks, Tim Neese formerly with HCFS, and I thought we had one more. Looks like that's it. So all good there. I've got to, so during the presentation, if you have any questions, please go to your chat functionality and send your questions to Todd Leverage. You can see him there on your screen. I think he's our moderator, and Todd will interject the questions as he sees. That looks like a slightly younger picture of Todd. How old were you there, Todd? How long ago was that?
You said I look old? Yeah, that was probably a few years ago. That's always on the to-do every year, but I look at it and go, nah, I'll just see how long I get with that. That was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, please direct your questions through chat to the younger Todd Leverage. And then he will interject those questions either during the presentation or at the end as he sees fit. At the end of the presentation, we'll also have some time where you can raise your hand and actually interactively ask a question. So be aware of that. We'll mention that. Next thing is I've got to read, I'm told I'm supposed to read something. So I'll actually read it out loud, but you can read it too. Today's webinar is worth one continuing professional CPE credit. To be eligible for CPE, you must answer at least 3 of the 4 polling questions. You don't have to be right. You don't have to be wrong. You just have to answer 3 of the 4. You have to show that you're alive and have a total viewing time of at least 50 minutes. Participants will receive a CPE notification via email when the credits are available. That's typically 7 to 10 business days. Unfortunately, if we have technical difficulties and such, we are unable to grant CPE credit if it precludes eligibility, i.e. you can't get the 50 minutes. CPE program sponsorships guidelines prohibit us from issuing credit to those not verified by the technology. In other words, it's out of my control. In accordance with the standards of the National Registry of CPE sponsors, CPE credit will be granted on a 50-minute hour. That 50-minute hour, which doesn't make sense, starts right now as Todd Leverage begins the introduction and kicks off our meeting. Thank you all, and we'll see you at the end.
All right, thank you, everybody. I want to introduce a really good friend. I'm going to make this about her because she's a special person, very dear friend of mine. She's Donna Wilkinson. She's a senior counsel at Ameriflex. Many of y'all may be familiar with Ameriflex. They specialize in tax-advantaged spending accounts, flexible spending accounts, HSA, do COBRA administration, and they're one of our preferred vendors that we work with at Lockton. Don and I've had a chance to work together in a couple of different areas. She does quite a bit of work on Washington, lobbying for tax-advantaged accounts. In addition to her role as general counsel there, HIPAA compliance officer. Prior to that, she worked at BDF, Barrett, Daffin, Frappier, Turner and Angle. A mouthful. Helping with investors and brokers. There was a counsel at marketing arm. She's from North Carolina. Been there back and forth. She comes in and does her work here, and then she'll make a COVID. She's back in North Carolina and back here now, so kind of bounces back between the two cities. She got a JD from North Carolina Central, and a BA degree from political science from Elon University. Very passionate person. You'll hear that today. Very active on Washington, up on Capitol Hill, and just a breath of fresh air in our industry. So without further ado, Donna.
Well, thank you, Todd. That was very nice. Thank you. I want to make sure everybody can see my screen. All right. Are we good there? Everyone can see the presentation?
Yes, all good.
Good, thank you. So thank you, everyone. As Todd mentioned, I kind of go between North Carolina and Texas, but right now I'm coming to you live from the resort town of Lucas, Texas. So much like our president, Donald Trump, I too am in a state of transition from having exceptionally fast internet to working exclusively with carrier pigeons is what it feels like to receive and send information. So it's good to have video here. That's great. So as Todd mentioned, I serve as senior counsel for Ameriflex. We are a third-party administrator for consumer-directed healthcare accounts, your favorite kind of accounts, those tax-free accounts, FSAs, HSAs, HRAs, along with dependent care and commuter accounts. Along with our affiliate company, Acressa Health, who is a payment platform solution for direct primary care physicians. We've got a large network here in the Dallas area, and I always enjoy meeting new people, learning about other businesses and how they're taking advantage of some of these tax-free programs that we work hard for in DC that exist. So please feel free to reach out anytime and pick our brain as it relates to that. Along with the council role, I do serve as one of our government relations liaisons, if you will, in and out of DC many times a year, although not so much this year, but typically a couple times a year. And while we've got lobbyists and coalitions that we work with in DC very heavily, we like the boots on the ground approach because nobody can tell a story like we can. Nobody has the data that we do, and nobody can get it done like we have been able to, and especially in 2020, even with the crazy year we've had. So I will say, given the result that we have right now, that over the last couple of weeks, we're still very optimistic about what we can get done over the next 4 years, over really the next 2. We are recalibrating a little bit for the new administration. We're working collaboratively with members in DC who are in transition as well. And our different coalitions, they're working on the legislative threats that we see to the financial and healthcare space, where we felt that we made big strides during the last 4 years. So any of those that may be threatened to kind of reverse. And really that transition work has been going on for over a year. I work with the American Bankers Association. We've been working on that for over a year when we saw this could be a possibility. So we're certainly not behind. If anything, we're ahead, preparing for that possible new administration. And that work remains ongoing. So, I like to say that our agenda doesn't change, but our tactics and strategy may. It's been a pretty wild ride the last 2 weeks, really over the past year. I know for me that the pandemic has expanded my role, requiring me to consider health risks of bringing employees back and heightened cybersecurity risks of having a remote workforce. So I was happy to have the election come and then watch it go, because I thought it would be one less thing on my plate, but here we are, it's still on our plate. And it seems to have only brought more confusion. I just had a call today with some more ABA lobbyists, and yeah, everyone in DC is just as confused as we are here in Dallas. So it's definitely been a fascinating year to watch some of this unfold for those of us that are in and out of DC. It's been we've had to really dig deep. It's been very thought-provoking in the healthcare and financial space. I'm trying to look at the silver lining. I'm never one to waste a good crisis. We've definitely had to solve for problems that I never even knew would exist in my lifetime. I think I've said you're on mute, or can you put yourself on mute exponentially a number of times higher than I ever thought that I would. I have more in common now with 14th century serfs than I ever cared to. But as we get into this, I know that you guys are all aware, we haven't really moved into a formal transition plan with the administration yet, because there's still some debate and discrepancy on election results. I know I've been asked about the different lawsuits that are challenging the election results and the votes that have been cast. And if I believe that, Joe Biden, who has been named president-elect, if that can change, if they've gotten it wrong. And I can say it's highly unlikely that will change. I don't see any constitutional issues at play. There's no facts or any real evidence at this time that's shown there's a big enough chance to overturn the outcome that we are already all seeing. Just this morning, you all may have seen the Times article, 4 more plaintiffs out of Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, dropped their cases challenging the integrity of the race. So, we're all reading the same articles. We're seeing the same clips, same litigation. So this is nothing new to all of us. But I think all of it is meandering towards a formal outcome of the Electoral College voting for President-elect Biden as the 46th president of the United States. And kind of what's interesting there is I've compared and contrasted this instance to what happened in Florida with the hanging Chad situation. And it feels a lot like the Florida recount. Now, obviously the substance and the margin is very different, but the feeling of this, we're in suspense, the suspension feeling just feels really, really similar. So for purposes of today, as we go through this, rather than debate if there was voter fraud or who did what, I'd rather just pivot to the idea and focus on the idea that President-elect Joe Biden will be our 46th president. So with that, are my slides moving? Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, so where have we been? Where haven't we been in 2020? Come on a journey with me back to January 2020 when we had no idea. Our definition of what is a pretty big deal has definitely changed this year. Back then, I probably would have told myself to do a really big Costco run, but hindsight's 2020. I actually did a video on our company website in January 2020 where I thought that the impeachment cloud was going to be the big topic in the election. So that's really funny. I guess we should probably take that video down. But anyway, let's get into this, the meat of the matter. So for the first few months of 2020, the IRS, DOL, CDC, Congress, just about everyone in DC, they didn't take a PTO day. They definitely didn't. They were at it. They were burning the midnight oil. They were throwing new regulations, guidance, orders our way. I couldn't go a day really without having to read pages and pages of published government documents. So, and actually this year, Donald Trump, he's issued 57 executive orders, and that's higher than usual. Now, actually much higher than usual, but remember, he's faced that buzzword an unprecedented year. So it does make sense. But first up was the CARES Act. So this was passed by Congress at the end of March, and it was over $2 trillion in economic relief. The bill's elements really were aimed at helping keep people engaged in the economy. First, it sent about $300 billion as cash payments to Americans. Individuals who made less than $75,000, they were able to get that one-time check of $1,200. And then married couples would also receive a check as well. And families got, I think, $500 per child. And I think it kind of tiered down from there. But it also handed out, this act handed out extra unemployment benefits. About $260 billion was the original estimate, but obviously that can change based on the number of people filing unemployment claims. And what the bill did was it did add that $600 per week on top of whatever base a worker received from the state. And that lasted, I think, for about 4 months. This act also extended the deadline to file your tax returns. It required private insurance plans to cover COVID treatment and tests. And actually, it does include the word vaccine, although we all know at that time, even right now, we don't yet have a vaccine, but it did require insurance to cover those for free. All loan and interest payments on student loans was deferred through December 31st, without penalty to the borrower for all those federally owned student loans. The bill also established a fully refundable tax credit for all businesses of all sizes that had to close or were distressed to help those businesses keep workers on their payroll. So for those employers with more than 100 full-time employees, the credit really was for wages to be paid to employees when they're not providing services because of the coronavirus. That makes sense. I don't even know if what I just said made sense. But those employers who had 100 or less full-time employees, they could use the deduction even if they weren't closed. So those that had 100 or more had to be closed in order to use it. Those with 100 or less, they did not have to close. But the goal of that was just to get those employees hired back, or at least put on furlough, to make sure they would have jobs to return to. One of the main features of the bill that I'm sure we've all heard ad nauseum about is the Paycheck Protection Program, but that was a huge deal. Originally, it was $350 billion that they put aside. They allocated for the Small Business Administration to provide those loans of up to $10 million. And then any portion of that loan you could use to maintain payroll, keep workers on the books, pay rent, mortgage, existing debt payments could be forgiven. Some existing debt payments could be paid. And then for the businesses who did receive one, in essence, the loans all turned into grants because it became a forgivable loan as long as you used it towards those items. So essentially it became a grant if they were used correctly. And that's kind of all up in the air too now. We're helping some of our clients through those PPP applications, and they can be a little confusing, definitely. Something subsequent to this that was passed was the PPP Flexibility Act, and that actually extended the deferment date of the first payment of that loan to 10 months after the end of the covered period. And it pushed that original time frame from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. So that was great. The DOL didn't let Congress have all the fun, though. I see your first polling question just popped up, so that's great. So yeah, the DOL didn't want Congress to have all the fun just with the CARES Act, so they decided to get tagged in. And in April, they issued some final rules that extended the certain timeframes under the IRS code because of COVID. So those extensions applied to group health and welfare plans and retirement plans. The final rule provided additional time to comply with certain deadlines that affected COBRA, so that COBRA continuation coverage, as well as extended times to make a claim for the benefits and to appeal those benefits. So those extensions actually apply with respect to the period from March 1st, 2020. That's when the federal government said, this is when the outbreak period started. This is when the pandemic started. And those will go until 60 days after the federal government announces the outbreak period is over. We don't yet know when that is, but they will let us know. It may be that because we're about to have an administration change, we may see that outbreak period last longer than what would have probably been put in place by our current administration. So good or bad, that's probably what we're going to see there. Those extended time periods for COBRA that applied to both the election period into COBRA, the time period a premium payment could be made into COBRA, and the time frame to submit a claim. Here we go. So in August, Trump then took the CARES Act even further. Because the CARES Act did implement somewhat of a foreclosure and eviction moratorium for all single-family mortgages insured by FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. He also instructed CDC to put in place more measures to temporarily halt those evictions and foreclosures. So the CARES Act only covered certain properties, so then they put in place this national eviction moratorium that we all know about now. That's what stopped landlords from evicting tenants who don't pay rent until at least December 31st, 2020. But there's a catch. The tenants that fall behind, they have to sign a declaration form. And I'll be honest, a lot of the tenants don't know about that. And so I think that's where a lot of landlords are tripping up tenants. And I've seen a lot of litigation come out because of that. Tenants are going to see attorneys, and attorneys are then filing these lawsuits that they had no idea they needed to fill out this declaration form. And the landlord took advantage of them. We've already seen a lot of landlord associations also challenging these orders, but so far, very few have been successful. So my guess is that moratorium will stay in place past December 31st, but we'll see. The gist there was that, homelessness can increase the spread of COVID. And so they wanted people to stay put. And I do want to make sure I mention this because I didn't in another presentation, but this moratorium, it doesn't prohibit late fees, nor does it let tenants off the hook necessarily for back rent they may owe. It just puts a moratorium on that foreclosure or that eviction, but they will still owe the money once this pandemic is over. So we may not be in a great situation there. The most recent rule that was issued was actually just 3 weeks ago on October 29th. HHS, DOL, and Treasury got together. My favorite three. I hate when they get together, actually. They got together and they issued a final rule which sets forth some requirements for group health plans and health insurance issuers going forward. This is the rule that we kind of have heard a lot about, but it's now happening. So the rule is going to require most non-grandfathered group health plans and health insurance issuers to, upon request, disclose pricing information specific to participants, beneficiaries, or enrollees, and then also provide public disclosure in machine readable file format. I'm not a tech person, so that sounds weird to me, but that will be regarding in-network, out-of-network, and prescription drug prices. So the rule mandates that these items for plan years beginning on January 1st, 2022, so we've got a whole year to plan for that, but it certainly is going to affect a lot of budgeting and financial decisions businesses make now. But yes, January 1st, 2022 is when that will go into effect. So this is going to be a significant burden for group health plans that are covered under this rule. It's going to affect a lot of us, a lot of our clients, a lot of our stakeholders. And I also do want to note that this has been a little confusing, but the rule does not actually apply to health FSAs or HRAs. That's something that took a little time to get through with Treasury, actually. So along with that, the departments have come out and said that in establishing this rule, what they're aiming to do is to provide plenty of health insurance data for consumers and third parties in order to reduce the overall healthcare cost, and then obviously promote competition in the healthcare market. However, I'm pretty confident this rule, I haven't checked today, but if not already, it will likely receive many, many legal challenges from health insurers arguing that it's going to undercut their ability to bargain with providers and drug companies. Right now, most patients choose their providers based on reputation or recommendation. So it remains to be seen how the rule would then affect patient choice, but price most likely then will go into that. It's like when I go to buy a Kenmore refrigerator, I can just type in Kenmore refrigerator into Google and type in what model I want, hit the shopping tab, and I can see if Home Depot or Best Buy or Lowe's, who has it the cheapest or who has a special, and I'll just go there. It's the same exact refrigerator. But look, this could be a good thing too. That's kind of the other side of the coin is there was a study that came out from the Rand Corporation. They found that employer-sponsored plans are paying hospitals about 2.5 times more than what Medicare pays for the exact same procedure, which it's not that surprising, but when you hear it like that, you're like, oof, that's a lot. Which means that, some hospitals are growing rich at the expense of some working middle-class Americans. So it kind of goes both ways, but it's definitely going to be a burden on coming 2022, a burden on a lot of group health plans. And remember that rule actually goes into effect. There's a rule similar to that goes into effect for hospitals beginning January 1st, 2021. So this is 1 year later. So maybe we'll get to see kind of how some of this plays out in 2021, since the hospitals now have to start being more transparent with their prices. One other item I want to mention, just kind of where we've been before we move forward, is the ACA lawsuit that's been out there. This has kind of been that cliffhanger of a legal challenge to the Affordable Care Act, ACA, Obamacare, whatever you guys want to call it. Last week, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in that case. And in all honesty, the oral arguments were a bit uneventful, but it did give us some insight on where the justices might land in the end. So we now have this new panel of justices because remember, we now have Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She took over for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So we were all hoping we would get some questions from her that would let us know where she was going to land, but we didn't really get a whole lot out of her. But this will be a really important decision for her to weigh in on. So really, the new panel of justices focused primarily on two issues. One, whether the plaintiffs in this case were actually even injured by the individual mandate, because they said if the individual mandate is zero, how are you actually injured? They really focused on that. The mandate was basically gutted in 2017. And then the second issue that they really focused on was the legislative intent. Chief Justice Roberts, noted that, if Congress wanted to kill the ACA, they would have done that back in 2017. I mean, they had a 900-page statute. They could have just put a big red X on, and they didn't. They only took their red pen and went to, page 387. So that was kind of where he landed. Kavanaugh also offered to opposing counsel. So right now it's Texas v. California, but he offered to opposing counsel in California that he actually kind of agreed with them that the court should not throw the baby out with the bathwater, even despite political pressure from the right to do so. So that was interesting. The decision in this case, it hasn't come out yet. It'll still be a little while, but I think it'll definitely serve as an indicator of what to expect from Justice Barrett, as I was mentioned. One thing I think the conservative justices need to be careful of here with this decision is the electoral blowback if they side with the plaintiffs and they rule that the ACA is unconstitutional as a whole. You may find that the gains the Republican Party made, we may see those reverse and fill seats with further left type of folks like AOC if they overturn the entire thing. I know that's been the press, so I did want to mention it and touch on it here as well. There we go. Okay, so where are we? I don't know. Where are we? I know it does not feel like real life. Where are we? But we're here. So unless you live under a rock, we obviously had an election back on November 4th. That day, that night, and even the day following, early observations were made. So it appears that many Republican voters were willing to vote against President Donald Trump while they supported other Republican candidates. Although, further data is going to reveal maybe different conclusions as that data comes out of how they split their vote. But that's what I'm seeing for how the state race numbers played out. Republicans picked up as many as 10 seats in the House, and only 2 Republican senators were defeated. So some of the states were really, really bizarre. We had President-elect Biden win, but in Georgia, Biden received 100,000 more votes than the Democratic Senate candidate. So 100,000 people said, yeah, I want to vote for Biden, but I don't like my Democratic Senate candidate. It's a little bizarre to me. So there definitely was not straight party ticket voting this time. In Nebraska, one of their suburban districts, the 2nd district, voters there, they defeated Trump by like an 11-point margin, but they sent their Republican congressman, Don Bacon, they sent him back to the House by a 6-point margin. So again, they didn't want to vote for Trump, but they wanted to keep their Republican congressman. So it's just interesting how the states how that all played out there. X out that. Yeah, people's votes were definitely split in a way that no one could have predicted. And I still don't think people understand yet. I think everyone's kind of jumping to conclusions so far, but it's just interesting. I think the two parties had hoped the 2020 election would render a very decisive judgment on the country's political trajectory. But, even after this race that broke many records for voter turnout and campaign spending, neither party has achieved a dominant upper hand here. So instead, while this election ousted President Trump, it narrowed the Democratic majority in the House. And right now, I'm going with the assumption that the Republicans are going to hold the majority in the Senate even once the Georgia race is complete, which we'll get to that. But that's still the assumption that I've got. So it was very interesting. By beating expectations, the Republican Party is in many ways energized coming out of this election, even though they're handing over the president's position. On the House side, Republican members may have to work harder against the president's agenda than they might have otherwise if Trump had stayed in, obviously. But Democrats are even in a worse position. They have the same old problem in the blue wall states that they have previously, but they have opportunities in the South and the Southwest. So, for instance, Obama won Pennsylvania by 10 points in 2008 and then 5 points in 2012. Trump then won it in 2016, and Biden only won Pennsylvania by 0.7%. That's a problem for the Democrats, for their blue wall states. They're losing them. Biden and congressional Democrats, they will need to work hard to maintain that blue wall, or they need to build upon their extremely narrow victories in places like Georgia or Arizona. So if they want to benefit from the success they had this time around, I think that this election has represented a continuation of the trench warfare that we have seen between the two parties that are increasingly defined by their activist flanks. This election, it's really denied either party the ability to claim a broad majority. So I'm not really sure if it's a victory for either side. It's definitely prompted a series of election cycles in which any gains the Democrats make in the country's booming cities and states, it's being offset by growing Republican strength in the other areas. So I think the Democrats viewed this election as an opportunity to deliver this, crushing repudiation to Republicans and the movement known as Trumpism. And President Trump and his allies saw the chance to cement this durable governing coalition led by the far right. In talking with my colleagues on the Hill last week, even today, as the results have kind of come into sharper focus, definitely a more sober mood is setting in DC for both sides. So unless the Democrats win the 2 seats in Georgia, President-elect Biden, he's going to arrive at the White House facing the exact same circumstances that his predecessors have for 8 of the last 10 years. That gives him such a limited window and scope to show that he can lead successfully. There's mounting signs of just how difficult it's going to be for either party to govern through compromise. So there's definitely a sober mood going on with all the Hill staffers I've spoken with. My Republican colleagues, they're telling me they're worried about Trumpism retribution. If they break with a leader who Trump remains a cultural and ideological lodestar of the GOP base. He just does. Even after inauguration, he still will. So they're a little bit worried about that. A lot on the Hill right now feel that neither party is really embracing like this head-on reckoning, if you will, with its own electoral vulnerabilities. They're just not owning it, period. Moderate Democrats, they've just mostly criticized the party's left wing. that they believe is what cost them the seats. And then the Republicans, they're remaining completely silent on President Trump and, quite honestly, some of his conspiracy mongering. So neither side is just handling this head on. And that's what a lot of my colleagues on the Hill are growing frustrated with. For my Democratic friends, the election definitely illustrated the fragility of the coalition they thought they had. I think they thought it was a lot stronger going into this election. And then for my Republican friends, they have a deep problem with the powerful grip that Trump retains on the party, even after inauguration, which is exactly the factor that, made some of those states flip, because there were Republicans in Georgia, there were Republicans in Pennsylvania that didn't want to vote for Trump. And so that's the issue that my Republican friends are dealing with right now. Okay, so what are we going to see kind of finishing up this 116th Congress? So we expect the Democrats and Republicans to try to compromise, but only on major outstanding issues. Cough, cough, budget, cough. During this last little lame duck session, Democrats had political incentive to wait until the next Congress, because they had hoped they were going to pick up all these seats in the Senate and they were going to get the presidency. So they thought, let's just hold off on all these issues till next year and then we'll be able to push it all through. Well, that didn't happen. They didn't really think all that through. And again, even with the Georgia race, I still do not believe Democrats will hold a Senate majority. That's just my opinion. But so the political incentive to push things off to next year, it's waned. And kind of compounding this is the loss that Democrats took in the House. It may be politically easier for Pelosi to go ahead and move on these issues now because she lost some people in the House. So she's going to have a smaller Democratic caucus next year. So it may be in her best interest to move now. So our current continuing resolution, or CR, that expires December 11th. So that's when our budget is up. Also up is our National Defense Authorization Act. So that's not yet been sent to the president. So all that's got to get worked out and figured out. Congress also, they need to extend several healthcare programs. And my guess is it's very likely that one major package is going to be assembled. One huge hunkin' rock of bills are going to be put together and passed in both chambers. I don't see how they're going to parse this out into little bills. One will be the budget, one is a COVID, one is for national defense. I don't see that happening because administratively, it's a massive undertaking. And not to mention, for both sides, including all of this in one huge bill, it provides a much bigger political impetus to get it passed and enacted into law. Biggest one obviously is the budget. So we got to approve those dollar bills. And then the second thing I think they're going to put in this huge bill before year's out is COVID-19. I know we've heard a lot back and forth about, will we see another rescue bill? They keep fighting about it. But yeah, I think most members on both sides of the aisle see the need to pass additional COVID-19 response bills. It likely won't be as robust as what Speaker Pelosi was asking for before the election, but I'm still thinking around 1.5 trillion. Some good news is that the Democrats and Republicans do agree that there should be another round of direct payments to individuals. So that's good to kind of pump some money more back into the economy. They all agree that aid for airlines is needed. Let's keep pumping money into them. They're hurting. And then also enhanced unemployment insurance, as well as extension of that Paycheck Protection Program, which is good for everyone. I looked today, and it also looks like there's only 12 federal district judges left that Leader McConnell needs to get appointed. So he'll need to do that as well before Congress is up. Now here on this slide, I kind of gave a breakdown of when we will most likely have a final result leading up to our January 20th inauguration day. But I think it's important to expect the unexpected. There is a process if as of January 20th, we still don't have a decision on the president. There is a whole thing we need to go through. And if we get there, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think then y'all can just meet me at the bar. Okay, where are we going? So President-elect Biden, he's going to move quickly. He already has moved really quickly on appointing members of his White House staff. Some well-reported names I heard this morning actually is former senator out of Delaware, because Biden's from Delaware. I feel like everyone from Delaware knows each other. But former senator out of Delaware, Kaufman, he's on the list. Longtime aide, economic advisor Jared Bernstein, he's on the list. Economic advisor Ben Harris, he's up. And then as far as his cabinet, so key cabinet members are likely going to be named in December, but they probably won't all go through until, I don't know, March, April. Clearly President Biden, he will have some constraints on appointments, especially if Senate Republicans maintain the majority control, which again, my opinion is they will. Leader McConnell, however, he's going to give him a certain level of leeway too, because remember, the Senate has to confirm these appointments to the cabinet. But Leader McConnell isn't going to stop it just because he's a member of the other party. He wishes Trump was there rather than Biden. He's not going to do that. Most senators believe that a president should be able to pick their own cabinet. Now, as for timing, it's actually taken progressively longer for each administration to fill out its cabinet. President George W. Bush, I think he had his at the end of January, just for some reference. And then President Obama and President Trump, they didn't have their cabinet done until, I think, March and April, respectively. I think what's going to be really interesting as he fills out this cabinet is, what's going to be interesting as he fills this cabinet out is that the money that Biden made the money that he raised in this campaign, the money that was poured in, half of it was from Wall Street and half of it was from Silicon Valley. They had very, very different priorities. And I think that's going to affect his cabinet choices. And I wonder how that's going to affect some of his behind closed door meetings and what we see come out in the first 90 days. They have Wall Street versus Silicon Valley, very, very different priorities. So that'll be interesting. The Commerce Department, which is something that we're all keeping an eye on, that's looking like it's going to be Meg Whitman. She's the current CEO of Quibi. So we all know they're shutting down. So she's definitely free and available. Who else did I hear today? Oh, HHS is looking like Governor Michelle Grisham out of New Mexico. They like to pick governors for that Health and Human Services department. A lot of governors have a lot of healthcare experience, and she does bring a good skill set. So those are the two I heard today when I was on the call. Then his initial policy moves. So we expect upon swearing in, we expect him to immediately use his executive authority to address a further COVID stimulus. Even if Congress passes one, he wants to make a mark. He wants to show, he's living up to his promises. He wants to show he's got power and he can use it. So he's definitely going to address a further COVID stimulus. At what level, I'm not sure. He's definitely going to re-engage on the Paris Climate Accord. We're definitely going to see immigration and DREAM Act discussions or executive orders. And you're definitely going to see him roll back executive orders that Trump passed on healthcare and the environment. Those are all promises he's made and promises he continues to make even now after the election. Some things that I'm talking to some of our clients about what's going to affect their business. Workplace culture is something that, and I use the word workplace culture, I don't really love that phrase, but we'll get into that. It's something that Biden promised to improve during his campaign. And I think that businesses, what they'll see in the culture piece is they'll see him strengthen equal pay laws, as well as what diversity and inclusion training and initiatives are going to be required by businesses of a certain size. I think you're going to see that come out pretty quickly and be a little bit disruptive in the beginning. And reporting will go right along with that. Employers can also go ahead and mark it down. They can expect a greater enforcement of laws targeting systemic discrimination and harassment. In terms of signaling we're seeing in the market, credit card data, other indicators kind of out of Financial Times and what we have, they're suggesting that even right now, consumers are beginning to pull back spending this month. As infection rates, hospitalization, death rates from the virus, to use media words, surge nationwide, we're seeing them pull back. States again are once again imposing new restrictions on economic activity in an effort to tamp down the spread. I will say today, I'm sure we all saw the stock markets were soaring, so that was great. That was encouraged by the news of Moderna's vaccine for the virus. It appears to be highly effective. And last week we got news about Pfizer's vaccine as well, so that's good news. That vaccine and the distribution of such, it would allow Americans to resume anything that close to resembling a normal level of travel and dining out, other types of spending. And that's probably still months away, but still good news nonetheless. So Biden's first economic test, I think, will be navigating the politics of that next aid package. Because we are still a couple months away from that vaccine being able to be distributed widely. I think Republicans, whether he's going to push his party to cut a deal with Republicans for a limited rescue bill before he takes office, or is he going to hold out for a larger package after? I think he's going to do both. I think he's going to push his party right now, and I think he's going to still do an executive order after. Okay, so we all know that Georgia also, where are we going? Georgia has 2 runoffs, January 5th. As of Friday, American Bankers was telling me $40 million has already been poured into this, and I'm sure by today it's doubled. I'm sure it's up to $100 million, has been placed in spending between now and January 5th by each respective party in the state. We've got a historic runoff situation. I would definitely caution you all, though, not to look at how Georgia voted toward the outcome of the presidential race, that it went to Biden. The state runoff is a very different electorate. There's some huge fundamental differences between the candidates, and the stakeholders behind them are going to show that. Complicating this a little bit further, though, is that Joe Biden, he's got a little bit of free time since he's not in office and Trump is. He's got a little bit of free time. So he's going to go campaign in Georgia, and he's going to see if he can move that needle at all. Here's why I kept saying I don't think Georgia's going to flip. I think Georgia's going to stay the Republicans, and the Republicans will keep their majority in the Senate. Again, this is my opinion. Democrats in Georgia right now, they're kind of like kids with divorced parents that they wait for their dad to show up on the weekend, and their dad never shows up. They just keep going out there every weekend and he never shows up. Dems keep doing this to them. They keep making promises and not keeping them. And so the Democrats have no one to blame but themselves, really, in Georgia. Trick me once, shame on you. Trick me twice, it's on me, that kind of thing. Democrats are going to feel that. Their electorate is definitely feeling it. So this is no longer the presidential race. This is something different. So that's why I think we're going to see the Republicans win there. I did want to note some Texas items as well, and it's just kind of about some of the leadership in the committees before we end. Speaker Pelosi, she's already announced her intention to seek another term as speaker. No other candidate has announced intention to challenge her, so she'll probably get that. Same with McConnell. Energy and Commerce, we are going to see a new ranking member there, and that's a big deal. And one of our representatives here out of Texas, Michael Burgess, he, along with Kathy Rogers out of Washington, they're competing for that spot. So that would be great if we get someone from Texas in who kind of understands some of our foundational business ideas. Along with that, Energy and Commerce also has 4 open Democratic member slots, and Sylvia Garcia she's actually a Democrat from Texas, but she's up for that. So that would be great too. On the Republican side, Dan Crenshaw out of Texas, he's also going to become most likely a Republican member of that committee. So that's great. We'll have Texas really representing on that committee, Energy and Commerce, and that's what I'd like to see. One thing, this is my kind of my last note before I hand it off. One thing that no one's talking about that I wish people would talk more about that I find really interesting is redistricting. Redistricting is going to happen before 2024. The deadline to draw those maps for DOJ clearance, that has already slipped by 3 months. I suspect it's going to be another 3 months because of everything going on with COVID. So my guess is we're going to have new maps probably figured out by next fall, which essentially cuts challengers' time to campaign in half. That's a significant challenge. Not to mention, we still have the challenge of coronavirus. So, you know, for candidates, if you don't know what district you're going to run in, it's hard to run. So I think that's something to watch as well, because they're going to have a very limited window. For Senate in 2022, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, those 5 Senate seats are up. So the Republicans should still be very, very, very nervous. It's kind of my last point I had on that. I wanted to see if, I know one of my colleagues, Kevin, is on, and I was hoping we could open the Q&A up to the group so that he could maybe give some of his insight to what he's seen in the marketplace right now because of coronavirus, the election, some of these executive orders and legislative act that have come out. So Kathy, I didn't know if I could then open Q&A up so we could hear his thoughts.
I'm fine with that. I'm probably fine with that. I know we've got what we've got about 5 minutes, 6 minutes left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's, he's going to give about a 5-minute little.
Kathy,
I think
Kathy or Leslie, can you make sure he can unmute? Who was it?
Yeah, so everybody should be able to unmute themselves now and ask questions.
Okay, so go ahead and
Okay.
run with that.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All
Yep.
good? Okay, so tough act to follow, Donna, as always. So just very quickly, kind of what we are seeing in our market as a reaction to all of this, and probably nothing super startling, but with the degree of uncertainty, one thing we're seeing from a lot of our clients, and this is a repeated story, is delayed decisions where they can delay decisions. So obviously what we offer is not central always to their benefits plan. And so where they can delay a decision, they are. And again, probably no surprise here, we're seeing that with larger or more enterprise level clients. Smaller clients seem to be kind of full steam ahead. As I mentioned in the Hangout, our COBRA volume has grown exponentially, which good for us, but we certainly don't like what that portends for our clients. Another big shift in our market is a high interest in alternative solutions to what we offer. I'm sorry, my little dog has chosen this moment to start playing with her squeak toy. Welcome to 2020. We've got a high interest in alternative solutions to benefits plans, to healthcare. So Donna mentioned earlier, direct primary care, virtual care, not only in the solutions themselves, but in alternative payment options for those increasingly. So one thing that was created by executive order, it'll be interesting to see if it sticks around, is a new version of the old HRA, the individual contribution HRA, which really allows employers to move away from a traditional health plan and kind of mitigate that risk and put that decision back in the hands of their clients. I know a lot of times brokers don't necessarily relish that, but it is here. It is a significant thing in the market today. And I think kind of the final big shift we're seeing in terms of our products is an increased scrutiny of the financial impact of them. Of course, these tax advantage plans could directly impact payroll, taxes, and stuff like that. So whereas, in years previous, our conversation was primarily an HR conversation, now we are seeing a lot more of a finance conversation around them. Donna, with that, I'm going to hand the mic back to you to handle whatever questions come in the remaining moment.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. Kevin sometimes just has a different perspective than I do. So I wanted him to give a little spiel. But yeah, Eric, Todd, Kathy, do we want to open it up to questions now if anyone has any?
Sure. Did you get any questions, Todd, over the, am I off mute? Yes, I am.
I have
Over
not
the
seen
chat?
any, but I guess I have a question. I mean, I guess
Okay.
just your 60-second tea leaves on what's going to happen with our healthcare system. I mean, it's obviously he's not for single payer, but will he be influenced by the far left? And what do we see going out? What should we be concerned about or aware of as we try to kind of protect our industry and our field here, as where most of us are in the healthcare space?
Yeah, I definitely think that you're going to see a lot of talk about single payer and Medicare for all, but I don't think you're going to see anything get accomplished. It's going to be like we talk about North Korea, setting off nuclear missiles into the ocean. You read about it in the headlines, you're like, well, that's a little scary, but I'm pretty sure nothing's really going to happen. I think that one thing that we're really going to focus on is changing the strategy that Republicans use in talking about healthcare. Republicans are going to control the Senate, and so they need to be able to really think through ways to lean on products and services that already exist. Lean on, hey, healthcare is provided by employers for a certain percent, whatever the data is on how many people have employer-sponsored healthcare. They need to change their strategy on how they talk about healthcare, and a couple of them have already done that. I know Ted Cruz, he's introduced a bill that I actually didn't think would gain any traction, and it's gained a lot of traction on both sides of the aisle. And this is why it's because of that, and I'll explain the bill in a minute, why I think then that's what we should be leaning on, is lean on ideas that actually help middle-class working Americans. As far as being worried about, I definitely think the burden on health plans is going to increase. One of the items I mentioned was that transparency bill. So that's going to cost money for group health plans that are not grandfathered. I think you're just going to see more burdens like that exist. As far as that Ted Cruz bill, Ted Cruz has introduced a bill that would decouple HSAs from high deductible plans, because the reasoning really is most plans, even though they're not called high deductible plans, they sure have a pretty high deductible. So he's offered that anyone could have this type of account. And for whatever reason, Democrats actually don't mind this idea. They like the idea that, yeah, any American could sign up for this type of savings account. So the Democrats are really focused right now on this middle-class working American, as they should be. Yeah, but as far as being worried about Medicare for all, I think we're going to hear a lot about it, but I don't think it's something we seriously need to worry about in the next 4 years.
Take one more question, Steve. You had a question, Steve Armand?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Donna, just curious, there has been just a very bipartisan approach to the COVID response. And I'm just curious if there's a moment now where you envision a more unified governmental approach to the pandemic largely, and what that might look like.
I do, especially because the election is over. Leading up to this, I think the reason we couldn't get another large COVID bill done was because everyone was worried about the election. Both parties wanted their name as the author. They wanted to have the win, and neither were willing to give the other party the win. Republicans wouldn't agree with Pelosi, and Democrats wouldn't agree with McConnell. They did not want the other party to have that win. So I definitely think you will see them work together more closely now that they're not so worried about their jobs. I definitely think you're going to see a more unified response. And especially, I think leading here just in this last month, I think you're going to see something happen before the next president goes into effect. My dog.
another 2020 response. Anything last, parting thoughts? I know we're at the end of our time here, but Donna, great job as always. I've always appreciated, admired your passion, and whenever I want to know what's going on in DC, you're the first call I make, and I think everybody got to see that today. So thank you.
I appreciate it. I really do. And if anyone has any questions or just you want to have a political debate, I'm always around. Please let me know.
Okay. Well, thank you to the panelists, the sponsors, the steering committee members, the participants. Our next presentation will be Wednesday, February 24th. And everyone gets their CPE. It's amazing. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.